Hi YouTube, Watchify here with another video. It's a follow-up video to my unboxing of the new Seiko 5 GMT model SSK003. There's a lot of buzz surrounding this watch, so I'll provide my opinion on it after wearing it for a while. This watch was announced in June of 2022 and started shipping in July. The initial release has three colorways consisting of the black dialed SSK001, the orange dial with black accents SSK005, and the watch that I have here, the blue dialed SSK003. One of the first things I noticed was how nice the watch looks on wrist. It really does come across as a watch that looks more expensive than what it really costs. I would say more so in the eyes of non-watch enthusiasts. For me, it's the bracelet, dial, and bezel insert and GMT hand combination that gives it a higher end look. Believe it or not, this is the first GMT watch in my collection. I knew about GMT watches, but it was never on my radar until this Seiko model came out. I think it was simply because I assumed they were too costly for the added functionality of the GMT. Seiko releasing this affordable automatic GMT is viewed as a game changer because, as far as I know, if you wanted an automatic GMT previously, you would have needed to spend $800 or more to get one. This SSK lineup retails for $475 and hopefully will be available for below retail as time goes on. Seiko's a major brand that sells so many watches that I think mass production and economies of scale allow them to do this. Previously, my focus had been on dive style watches, dress watches, chronographs, and field style watches. I think I was also sort of wondering why someone would need a GMT hand on their watch. I've never traveled internationally, and in the United States we only have 4 main time zones, so it was never really difficult to do the math in your head in terms of what time it was in another part of the country. That's the thing though, I realize now that the GMT is really meant for the international traveler. Something I'm not, of course, but I'm not a diver either, and that doesn't stop me from buying dive watches. One might say that this SSK003 is the poor person's Rolex GMT Master 2, but I'd say it's more like the thinking man's Seiko SNR033. That watch shares visual similarities, but costs $5,500 retail. For that price, you would think it was a Grand Seiko, but no, it's a Seiko, but one from their Luxe line. And don't get me wrong, I'm sure that's a spectacular watch with finer polishing, and it has a Seiko spring drive movement. But still, with this SSK003, I feel you're getting about 3/4 of the way there in terms of appearance for only spending 8% of what that SNR033 costs. This SSK033 really puts on a show outdoors in the sunlight. The sunburst effect blue dial changes shades based on the amount of light hitting it, and in some lighting even looks purplish. In low lighting it appears to be a deep dark blue, while outdoors you can see the blue come to life. In terms of the dial's texture, I don't detect any pattern on it. Up close it just appears to have a matte-like finish. The indices in the 3-hand set will be familiar to Seiko SKX and 5KX owners. The indices are polished where they're not covered by Seiko's proprietary LumiBrite compound. I'm glad they didn't try to squeeze in a truncated indice at the 3 o'clock position like they do on their newer Prospex watches. There's only a date complication at 3 o'clock and it is unframed. The date wheel is white on this watch to provide some color symmetry. The applied Seiko logo has a brushed finish and sits above a printed 5 logo. I feel the 5 logo and the automatic wording are done in a gray rather than a pure white. The GMT wording is in red, and that's pretty much it for dial text. I'm glad Seiko didn't clutter up the dial by adding jewel count or water resistance print. Finally, the red GMT hand is what really makes this watch different from a regular 5KX. The chapter ring does a good job at matching the dial color and has white 24-hour markings. My first thought was, why put the 24-hour markings both on the chapter ring and the bezel insert? Of the two, of course, the bezel insert's the easier to read at a glance. Speaking of the bezel insert, it's done in hardlex rather than aluminum, which I think gives it a completely different look. The top half is black while the bottom half is done in a blue that, just like the dial, appears darker or lighter depending on the lighting conditions. It's a flat insert rather than a sloping one, and it appears level to the flat Hardlex crystal. The crystal has the familiar beveled outer edge that Seikos are known for, but the main thing you'll notice is that this watch has a cyclops over the date window. I'm a fan of cyclopses, and I think the benefit of the date magnification outweighs the downside of dust and smudges that you often see accumulate around the cyclops. I won't spend a lot of time on the case because I show it's identical to the 5KX case, including measurements. At first I thought the Seiko had an added polished bevel on the side, but when I looked at my 5KX model, it has it also. It's actually the SKX case that doesn't have that. So dimensions are up on the screen. I thought the case was going to be slightly thicker due to the 4R34 movement, but I measured the same thickness on my Seiko SKX009, which is 13.7 millimeters. The 42 millimeter case is a good size for this watch, and nowadays 42 millimeters is the maximum size I get in case size for my 6 3/4 inch wrist. Seiko always does a good job at making a watch appear smaller on the wrist than its dimensions indicate, and it's no different here due to the short 45.4 millimeter lug-to-lug distance. The similarities with the 5KX extend to the underside of the watch, where you see the exhibition screw-down case back, and to the rotating bezel design, which also keeps true to the SKX and 5KX look. The crown is push-pull and is unsigned just like on the 5KX. There's a radial brushed finish on the top of the crown also. I think a commonly seen mod with this watch will be to change out the unsigned crown to a signed aftermarket one. It's exciting that with this watch we now get a new movement with the Seiko 4R34 automatic GMT. It looks just like the more common 4R36 at first glance, and Seiko didn't decorate this movement, as I think, just like with the 4R36, it's going to be their mainstream affordable movement, except now with a GMT complication. You could soon start seeing this movement in micro brands in the form of an NH34, and that has a lot of enthusiasts excited, and it's really going to open the door to even more affordable GMT automatics being available that will probably have upgrades like sapphire crystals, signed crowns, and sapphire or ceramic inserts out of the box. It'll also be interesting to see if Seiko ports this movement over to their other existing watch lines like the Turtle, Presage models, or even their Field Watch SRPG line. Speaking of that, if you already own one of those watches, you could buy an NH34 once they become available and convert your existing watch into a GMT watch for not much cost. I'd be interested in trying that out with either my SBSA111 or SNZG13 one day. In my unboxing video, I did an initial time grapher reading, but after wearing the watch on wrist, I can see that it's running 3 seconds slow per day. Not bad at all, I'd say, although I would have preferred that it was running 3 seconds fast, as it would have been easier to resynchronize. The way this GMT works is that you set your home time like you normally would, then push the crown to the first position and turn clockwise to jump ahead in 1 hour increments. I've got mine set 3 hours ahead here to indicate US Eastern time zone. So at a glance I can see that it's almost 1200 hours or 12 noon on the East Coast. I think this would be more useful the further away your track time zone is. On the topic of mod parts, it looks like most if not all of the mod parts that fit the SKX and 5KX would be compatible with this new 5 Sports GMT line, so that opens up a ton of modding possibilities for owners of this watch. I'm sure those will start showing up on social media soon if they aren't already. Having said that, I really think this is going to be the one SKX or /5KX model in my collection that I don't do any modding to. I've said that before about other watches, but with this watch I think it'll hold true. I've pointed out that I don't have an issue with Hardlex, and the OEM bracelet is of better quality now with these new models. Seiko going back to the Jubilee style bracelet was another great move on their part. They upgraded the end links, so those are now solid instead of hollow. I'm sure this is going to disappoint aftermarket bracelet makers like Strapcode though. The clasp remains stamped metal, but those are easy and inexpensive to swap out if that really bothers you. The bracelet tapers from 21.5 millimeters to 17.5 millimeters where it meets the clasp. The links are held together with push pins, which are easier to work with than the pin and collars. The links are polished on the sides and on the smaller center link sections, and brushed elsewhere, including the entire underside. I can appreciate that the stamped fold over may allow for the clasp to sit lower on the wrist, but I dislike how the long pivot section visually interrupts the lay of the bracelet. When it comes to quality control, I noticed in the unboxing that the chapter ring is out of alignment with the dial indices. This is most noticeable when looking at the 6 o'clock marker. Since the bezel is bidirectional, you won't need to worry about bezel insert alignment, so the chapter ring alignment is probably where you're going to see any issue. I could fix mine by taking out the movement and nudging the chapter ring in one direction, but I haven't felt the need to do that yet. So to wrap up my thoughts on this watch, I'd say if you're in the market for an automatic GMT and you're a Seikophile, then this is the watch for you. The problem will be availability, at least initially, but hopefully that dies down soon. If you don't really care about the Seiko brand, you could wait for the micro brands to start coming out with their affordable GMTs and then grab one of those, which I'm almost sure will cost less than the $475 retail price of this Seiko GMT. I feel Seiko has another hot seller on their hands and pretty much a money-making machine, as they can come out with different colorways and special editions to appeal to a wider audience, just like they do now with their 5KX line. That's going to be it for this video. Hopefully you found it helpful or interesting, and if you did, feel free to leave a like, comment, or subscribe. Of course, I wanted to thank you for watching, and hopefully I'll see you in another video.